All right, Arash, I want to thank you so much for taking the time out. I know, again, you have a really busy schedule for coming on the podcast today.
Yeah,
Um,
good to go.
just to open up, yeah, this is something I kind of really ask everyone because I kind of like hearing the stories behind everyone and where their passion for basketball started. So, where did the love for the game kind of start for you? And is this kind of something you've always had planned as a career?
Huh. I'm going to date myself here, but the Showtime Lakers, Magic Johnson and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar,
Mhm.
um, like I worshipped those teams as a kid. I was just telling the story the other day, actually, about how I'd be like 7 years old, 8 years old. In those days, you'd get a national game of the week on weekends on CBS and then NBC. NBC ended up doing double headers in the Jordan era.
Mhm.
But like maybe once every 2 or 3 months in the middle of the week, there'd be an NBA game on TV.
Mhm.
Like that's how it was when I was like, grade two, grade three type thing.
Mhm.
And so I would like battle my parents when those days would come. Because usually it was one of the Lakers or the Celtics were the national games, were the featured games. I'd be like, man, I gotta watch them. I gotta watch them. And then by the time tip off rolled around, I'm like passed out by the end of the first quarter. But uh, we used to tape Laker playoff games on the VCR and then like in the summer go back and watch them win championships. So um that's yeah, I got the Lakers to thank for that, Kyle. I got to tell you, man, I can still name you like going from like
Mhm.
80 from the 87, 88 teams, 89 teams, their whole roster, their whole rotations,
Mhm.
all that stuff.
And like, ever since you were little, like, did you always kind of envision yourself having a career in sports media, or is this something that just kind of happened along the way?
I think by like grade 7 or 8, I realized I
Mm.
wasn't going to play in the NBA or play in the ATP tour. And I
Mm.
remember before Marv Albert, Dick Stockton was like the lead play-by-play guy for the
Mm.
NBA on CBS. So it was him and Tommy Heinsohn. And I'm like, man, that looks like a cool job. That looks pretty dope to be able to do that. I
Mm.
want to do that. Um, and so from a young age, I've always kind of not just pursued it, but wanted to do it too.
Mm. And we've kind of seen how like sports media and sports journalism has evolved over the years, and that seeing you has been kind of I've been on like following your work, but seeing you as a one of the prominent figures in like Toronto media, and then seeing now how the NBA has evolved. A lot of players recently have come out with their own podcasts, like Draymond Green, Paul George, calling themselves the new media. Do you think it's it's not a good look for journalists anymore because players are coming out with their own podcasts, or do you think this is a good thing for journalism as a whole?
I think it's good for fans who want to consume content to be able to
Mm.
have both. How honest, um, how honest are some of those guys going to be?
Mm.
How honest was Draymond? And I really like Draymond's podcast. I thought, especially after game two of the finals, when he and Steve Kerr started talking about what happened with Jamal,
Mm.
that was great. But how honest can Draymond be after the Jordan Poole incident?
Mm.
So I think there's a balance of both that you want. I don't, just like anything else in life, you're not just going to restaurants, you're going to mix a little bit of grocery store and restaurant and pub and whatever into it. I think that the opportunity and ability to have player driven content is great,
Mm.
but I think there's a grain of salt that you got to take with everything on both sides of it.
Yeah, like I definitely agree because there's a couple times he's not answering certain questions on his own podcast properly. He's kind of ducking things, and I was just thinking he's calling himself the new media, but I don't. It's kind of weird because it kind of feels like an attack on journalists, but it's like even after all your years of experience, do you feel like kind of the media gets a bad rap from the players, like at least in the NBA?
I think the media there's always been a division between
Mm.
church and state. I think the worst thing that's happened to journalists and journalism was the 2016 US presidential election and the aftermath of it. And the attack on democracy and the real questioning of journalists and all that, questioning of the media, and all now with in a social media age, internet age, all the false information that can be spread out there. I think this goes way beyond sport. Look, I look at a guy like, who's the most prominent active athlete, North American sports athlete in the world, LeBron. LeBron has many working relationships with many different people throughout the media. What's going on right now in Portland and Miami? It's not just Dame's getting his narrative out through Mark Spears and Chris Haynes and his people. So there's room for both. And it's just an understanding of how the working relationship is going to go that's really important.
Yeah, like it's just you can see easily how sometimes the media and the players can work together, and kind of like switching gears a little bit into.
But here's the other thing, Kyle, like media is not like, we don't look at all players the same way.
Yeah.
And so no player is painted with the same brush, no coach is painted with the same brush, no GM is painted with the same brush, yet somebody who wears a credential is painted with the same brush. That's never made sense to me.
Yeah. And like I've always felt like with this kind of new media, like his podcast saying, yeah, I will tell the truth, but you can see like there's certain things Draymond doesn't say, or there's things they actively avoid with regards like to like essentially say journalists in general, or either interviewing or asking questions at the press conference or on their own podcast. They kind of ask the tough questions, because it's things that people want to hear, and we're not necessarily, because they want to say we're always pushing a narrative, but I wouldn't say we're always pushing a narrative type thing. And I want to get your opinions on this too. With the NBA draft, I saw that Woj kind of took a night off, but Shams kept going, and people were kind of kept like leaking the picks, and people were getting really upset at Shams for leaking the picks. How do you feel about the whole thing? Do you think like he should, because that's technically his job, or do you think he should have just kind of like I'm off for the night?
Well, I'm trying to. Woj didn't take the night off. Woj was given a directive to not tip picks.
Okay.
Just like it's happened in the NFL draft for the last number of years. Why? Well, it's because the draft is an entertainment product. When the number, for instance, when the number 5 overall pick in the draft is announced on the podium and he walks across the stage, the actual conference call is already at like pick 9 or 10. So Woj works for Disney, works for ESPN, which is televising it, and they're going to sell the sizzle. Watch the NFL draft. Adam Schefter's not tipping picks. Chris Mortensen's not tipping picks. But what they are doing is letting you know the details of trades that are being made at that point. So it's, look, Shams is just trying to flex that I have the phone number to the conference call. Congratulations.
Yeah.
And if you think, like, God bless you, if that matters to you, that's important to you, all the power to you. I think as consumers of a product, I don't want to be tipped off because I want to enjoy the show. And so it's teach their own type thing.
And I saw like a little bit of an article come out, but wouldn't Shams wouldn't there be a conflict of interest? Because I think there was something him working for FanDuel, and he kind of leaked a wrong, or like he tipped a wrong pick, and people kind of put their money down. So wasn't there a way he could possibly get in trouble just because of the whole FanDuel kind of him working with that, but like leaking a wrong pick where people could put money on?
This is where the lines get really blurred. And so here's the thing, Kyle. To me, the most important thing that you need to have in this industry is credibility and respect. And once your credibility gets called into question, that's an issue. But we all know who we work for. The directive from Woj, the directive to Woj rather, was don't tip picks.
Mhm.
If the directive from FanDuel to Shams, and I don't know if it was or not, but the fact that we're even talking about it, that's an issue.
Yeah. Yeah, it was really interesting. I didn't even take it in after because I was like, okay, he's just kind of usually doing what he does, reporting the draft, and then the next day I'm seeing people really upset with Shams because how are you going to work for a company like FanDuel, but then sometimes you're giving the wrong information and people are using that information to place bets. And I didn't even consider that. Like I didn't even consider there was a whole conflict of interest that could be going on. And it was just weird to me. I never knew something like that could happen. But I was wondering too because I was kind of rewatching the finals yesterday and I noticed that I remember that you got a chance to cover the NBA finals. What was that whole experience like for you? Like um how was it in general?
It was incredible.
Mhm.
I'll be honest. It was amazing, and I've been
Mhm.
very fortunate to do a bunch of them. I was in Miami the night LeBron won his first one
Mhm.
against Oklahoma City. I did parts of the 2016 finals, the Cleveland Golden State, the one where LeBron won another one. The most impressive, the most improbable, the most incredible, the most impressive one of them all that he has.
Mhm.
I did the Raptors one in 19,
Mhm.
which was neat for a lot of reasons. Um, but this one was sensational.
Mhm.
Um, the the Jokic Murray story, the Jokic Murray tandem. I mean, I was trying to think of when was the last time there was as dominant a 1-2 punch in sports.
Yeah.
And I really don't know when it was.
Mhm.
I really, really don't. Like I put them ahead of Brady and Gronk.
Mhm.
Um, Jokic is, well, until the final started, the most unknown superstar
Yeah.
in the world. And the building in Denver was rocking, Kyle. Like it
Mhm.
was loud and it was awesome. Miami's Miami. There were great storylines. And it was one of the more memorable assignments I've had in my career. Just the way that series played out and
Mhm.
how our content played out. I was really pleased with the work we did, and it was just a thrill to be in those buildings uh,
Mhm.
for those series.
And as kind of as someone that saw, I guess you saw Jokic obviously play live. Do you think he deserved the regular season MVP, especially knowing like seeing how he played in the finals and seeing his playoffs play and Embiid's type of level of play in the playoffs as well?
I think it's a flawed question, Kyle.
Hmm.
I think it's irrelevant what they did in the playoffs
Hmm.
because the MVP is not who's the best player in the world.
Hmm.
It's how good were you in the 82 games of the regular
Yeah.
season. So if that's the criteria for the award, then Embiid should have received it,
Hmm.
knowing full well Jokic is the better player.
Hmm.
Um, you know, you go back, Jokic pretty much put it in cruise control for the last 20 games of the season because he knew he had to be ready for the
For the
playoffs.
playoffs, yeah.
Lessons learned from along the way. You know, in 2019, in June of 2019, the best player in the world was Kawhi Leonard.
Hmm.
But he had no business being in the MVP conversation because we barely saw him in the regular season.
Hmm.
So it's, to me, we have to remember what the MVP is.
It's true. Yeah.
And I don't think that Jokic was being diplomatic when he said, hey, Embiid deserves it.
Hmm.
Because the reality is Embiid did,
Hmm.
based on the criteria.
Because I know a lot of people kind of they'll change their narrative once, and I agree with you on this that like it should remain to the regular season because as soon as the playoffs hit, they'll be like, "Oh, this is who truly deserved regular season MVP." But then when you go back to the regular season, they either were not playing as many games, or they weren't playing, or they just weren't playing as well as the MVP. And I know that the NBA recently came out with you have to play a certain amount of games to either be eligible for the either like the all NBA teams or awards. Do you think like this was the right like decision to make? I think it was like 60 something games they said you have to play.
You have to. You have
Mhm,
to if you're. Let's remember what the NBA is. The NBA is not a sports league.
mhm,
Let me like rephrase
yeah,
that. The NBA is not sport.
mhm,
The NBA is an entertainment property
mhm,
that is asking the public to pay money to consume it.
mhm,
You're asking the public to pay a ridiculous amount of money for a ticket, an absurd amount of money for food and beverage once you're in the building.
mhm.
I walked around the Heat Arena, the Denver Arena. It's like 17, $18 for a beer.
Yeah.
Um, and you're asking people to consume your product, either conventional cable or satellite or streaming or whatever. You're asking them to invest their time and their money into it.
Mhm,
Now, if Kyle, as the consumer, really wants to go watch the Jokic Murray show,
mhm,
he gets one opportunity in Toronto to do that a year.
mhm.
And if these guys are going to say, you know what, we're only going to play 30, 40 games a year, what's your product?
Yeah.
If Kyle's going to say, okay, well, I couldn't afford tickets, or I couldn't get tickets in Toronto, I'll go to like somewhere off the beaten path
Mhm,
in NBA circles. Detroit, where tickets are easier. And so you get in your car and you drive to Detroit, and you spend money for hotel, and you spend money for ticket, and those dudes aren't playing. What's your product? What are
mhm.
you marketing? What is it? And I get that, coaches are saying we're in the business of winning games, but and they are, but the overall product is entertainment. And if the
Mhm.
entertainers aren't out there, then what is your product in the end?
Yeah, it's true. I guess this is the way of battling kind of the load management issue, as I should say, because a lot of players taking off games and just risking one game. Like, say I want to see LeBron because I've never actually got to see LeBron play live, so
Sure.
I would want to buy tickets. And if he's taking off a game, that would just sucks. So it's a yeah, I agree. It's a good way. And at the end of the day, the NBA is a business, and this is something I kind of wanted to get your take on or your opinion on the All-Star game that happened this past season. I think it was one of the most kind of like controversial on social media I've seen, just hate wise, of players not playing defense, of players kind of just half-assing it, people not really watching. The All-Star game isn't the All-Star game anymore. Do you think changes need to be made, or should they just kind of like overhaul All-Star weekend in general? Because a lot of people are just like, what am I watching?
Yeah, I mean, the only solution I would have for it
Mhm,
is to make it USA versus the world.
mhm,
And maybe in that way there's a little bit. I don't know what can motivate a professional athlete. What's the average salary of an all-star? Probably around $35 million a
yeah.
year. What's going to motivate you? I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting too because I've thought like, what are ways to get them to play defense? You can always try and pull maybe whatever team wins the charity, or I don't know. You can't really. There's no really incentives you can give them. So I was thinking maybe they kind of take out either the skills challenge and add a 1v1 tournament. Maybe do guards and bigs because I know these guys are super competitive, and hopefully a lot of people would want to see a 1v1 tournament. But with the All-Star game itself, I was watching this year and they had the new like
But
shot.
why
Like,
am I going to do something that could injure me?
that's true. That's like that's another point I was seeing too, because something gets you injured. I know Kawhi himself, when he played an All-Star game, he scored like one bucket. He's like, I'm not playing no more.
Right.
Just just
And
because I
it's
don't want
hard
to
to
be.
blame him.
Because as soon as you get injured, it's over. It's over for the regular
It's a
season,
wrap.
and it's
Yeah.
because for just a random All-Star game in Utah, you know, and especially when they want to contend. I don't know, but I feel like there's something, especially because you said the NBA is a business too, and people wanted to want to watch the All-Star game, but at a point.
Understand this. The
Mhm,
reason why all-star games exist today,
mhm,
like in the old days, it was because, if you lived in uh, Detroit,
mhm,
Boston, you would never see superstars unless they were in your town, just because of technology and TV capabilities. Now you can see everybody at your fingertips immediately. But the reason why All-Star games exist is because all of the NBA's corporate partners, all of their sponsors, all of the people who fund the NBA, this is effectively their annual general meeting, their convention, their trade show, their get-together. This is where you get wined and dined. It's 3 or 4 days in LA or New York or Chicago, or I guess Salt Lake City too. That's why it still exists. No other reason.
Yeah, exactly. I guess just like, again, at the end of the day, like, it's a business, they got to make money too. And I know we did talk, this was our assignment yesterday in class with the whole John Moran situation, but him getting suspended 25 games and just kind of like the team releasing a statement, do you think that was the right thing for them as a team and Adam Silver to go forward, or do you think the punishment should have been harsher?
Well, I mean, here's the thing. If that was, and I don't want to pick on Brandon Clark, but if that was randomly Brandon Clark who had done these things, his suspension would be a lot longer. But John Moran is a megastar in this league, and Nike's a big partner of the league, and they got to make big part of what they're doing here. I thought the 8 games was sufficient. And part of the thing is, okay, well, if you want to suspend, you got to involve the Players Association in on something like this too.
Yeah.
So it's a combination of that, but more than that, the NBA needs Ja. And as long as you're in a decent negotiating position, that's important in anything in life.
And it's your answer kind of just like brought this up for me, because I was thinking about this as well. Obviously, the NBA needs to market its players, and it needs to be very marketable. Do you think after LeBron retires, is there a player like LeBron in the NBA right now that can be as marketable as he was, or kind of be the face of the league? Because we're always talking about the next face of the league, but LeBron was that superstar that kind of transcended media and was everywhere. Do you think there's a player right now that can kind of be that?
No. The closest thing I would say is Steph. But Steph's no spring chicken either. The dude who can be it, but he just has to leave Milwaukee and has to embrace that role more, is Giannis.
Yeah.
So but beyond that, I don't know. Do you think there is one?
Because I know everyone always says like Luca and stuff, but I guess it's like talent wise, like that's just like basketball wise when you talk about
the needle, the needle wise,
Yeah, exactly. That kind of generational player that everyone talks about. I think like you said, the closest thing would be Giannis. I don't know who else. I don't see Tatum as that guy. And this is not trying to hinder or a knock on Tatum's basketball abilities. This is just strictly face of the league. Don't think Tatum could be that guy. I don't not even someone like Wembanyama, because I know he's generational, but I still don't see it. Like at a point you have to be, there's just something different that needs to be. It's like an MJ or a Kobe or LeBron. I don't know exactly. I don't know who else I would even think. Again, Giannis would be there, but does it have to do with where they play? I know you said Milwaukee too. Like if you were to move to say LA, obviously would that create a bigger change, or is it just comes down to him as a person?
I think it's a little both. I absolutely believe it's a little of both. I mean, KD was a marketable star in Oklahoma. You need a little bit of appeal, and you also gotta want to be the star. Like Nikola Jokic basically told us in the months of May and June, he wants nothing to do with it. There's a lot that comes with being the face of the league. There's an obligation, there's a responsibility. You have to have opinions on issues. You have to speak every day. You have to really mind your P's and Q's. Some dudes just don't want to be that or do that. They just want to be anonymous, and God bless them. Good for them.
Yeah, exactly. Cause I think LeBron probably accepted that pressure from 20 years old. So he's been dealing
Yeah,
with this for
even younger. I think he was on the cover of Sports Illustrated in high school.
yeah, with the chosen one he put
Right.
already put on. And again, this reminds me too. Do you think it's a fair comparison? People saying Wembanyama is as hyped up as a prospect as LeBron was.
Just it's so hard to compare because it's a different era and a different time.
Mm-hmm.
Like 25 years ago, how hype was made and how hype was done and how different it all was
Mm-hmm.
than today. It's really difficult to compare.
Mm-hmm.
I
Because
I, just, I
it's hard again, like it's hard to say because
and he's also like you have a European guy
yeah.
against an American guy. Like I understand why there's a comp and how badly they want Wembanyama to be great, but like
Mm-hmm.
man, I remember when Zion was coming out, people were comparing him to Shaq, and I'm like, slow down.
Mm-hmm.
So I he may be as talented a prospect as since LeBron.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't know if uh, the appeal is quite there yet.
Mm-hmm.
Being in San Antonio and the photo with Duncan and Robinson and Elliott and Manu. I mean, Pop was the one. Pop was there at the dinner.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to make sure it's we, not me, when it comes to Wembanyama, which seems to be his personality too.
Yeah. And like it just kind of shows me, like, do you think there will ever, I know it's impossible to say for certain, but do you think there will ever be a player with as much expectations put on them as LeBron was coming into the league?
No,
Because
no,
I generally don't think, because he was expected to be greater than great and he exceeded those expectations. I don't think
correct.
we'll ever see a player not only live up to the expectations but exceed the expectations too. I just think it generally just can't happen. It can't happen anymore. When it comes to Wembanyama himself, just kind of focusing on him, do you like, are you believing the hype, or is it just kind of something you'll have to see?
Yeah, you got to see, right? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I don't know. Everything everybody says is that he's going to be generational, and it's obvious that he's got the right demeanor and approach and all those things to it. But you got to go out and do it. And here's the other thing, Kyle. Like, I know, like nobody remembers this, but okay, do you remember who was taken one pick before KD?
I should
So
remember.
KD
Yeah,
went two to Seattle,
yeah,
and Greg Oden went
yeah,
first overall.
yeah.
And Greg Oden was special, man. Greg Oden was great.
Mm-hmm.
And then Greg Oden had a bunch of massive injuries that needed massive surgeries,
Mm-hmm.
went down a dark spiral.
Yeah.
Dude's got to stay healthy. Like I was listening to Sean Elliott on the Dan Patrick show, and Dan asked him, "What'd you guys talk about at dinner?" And he's like, "Here's this kid, and he's asking us about how do I make sure I'm up on my sleep, and how do you get rest, and how do you
Mm-hmm.
guys navigate the travel schedule?" Elliott's like, "I'm used to hearing kids come out saying we're the best clubs."
Yeah.
So it's he's different. He's
Mm-hmm.
different.
And like, I guess what Greg owed to, because I remember he had the injury, or like not injury, he had one leg was longer than the other. So I
Yeah.
guess people were saying he might have been it, like this was gonna happen from the start. And just one question before I let you go. I know you briefly mentioned it, or you mentioned it before. You covered the NBA finals, you got to cover LeBron's first. Is there a memory that kind of just like sticks out for you, like your favorite memory out of covering all these different finals that just like means the most to you?
Um. Yeah, I'd say there's two. And both were on the same night. One was it was the night the Raptors won it all in Oakland,
Mm-hmm.
and like they were setting up the stage for the trophy presentation, and my camera operator and I get onto the floor because
Mm-hmm.
part of the rights holder thing or whatever.
Hmm.
And I'm like, I just remember taking a deep breath and just telling myself, all right, dude, just stay in the moment, right? All we're like, it's going to be as soon as we walk out on the floor from underneath here at the baseline, it's going to be chaos. I look at Vern and it's so loud and it's crazy and I can't really talk to him because it's so loud. So I just talk into the mic and he's got his headphones in. I said, Verno, I'm just going to communicate with you through this microphone and we're looking for one-on-ones. And if you need to grab me, if you see someone, do it. Otherwise, and I'm like, there's no rules here. We're just going to grab whoever we can and literally grab. And I just remember that, just navigating that. And we grabbed Nick Nurse just as he walked off the stage. We grabbed Pascal. We had one-on-ones with Gasol and Fred and Danny Green. And just that night and being able to do that in the immediate aftermath of them winning a championship, knowing people back home were watching and pumped and excited, that was cool. And then the other one was later that night, we're all done. We're all kind of standing around. We're like, wow, this just all happened. And Alvin Williams was working with us. And the night before, we'd had some cocktails in the lobby bar. And he's like, hey, man, like, how'd you end up a basketball fan? We're just talking hoops. And I told him I was a fan of the Showtime Lakers. He's like, yeah, me too. And he's like, so, over drinks, he's like, who did you hate? I'm like, well, the Celtics. He's like, yeah, but who'd you hate? I said, man, I was scared shitless of Larry Bird as a kid. But I'm like, I hated Kevin McHale. So we're all wrapped up. We finally finish. Just kind of stand there. And NBA TV had set up in the paint in the key right underneath the hoop. And they were wrapping up. And almost like the devil in your ear, I feel Alvin come up from behind me. And he's just like, there he is, man. Yes. McHale was on the NBA TV set. And he's like, remember when you were like 8 years old? Remember how much you hated him? He's right there. You'll never get this chance again. Look how close he is. There he is. There's Kevin McHale. I'm like, God damn it, Alvin. So I go up to Kevin and I'm like, and he was talking to Matt Devlin. He and Devlin used to do games together on Turner and NBA TV.
Yeah.
And Matt's like, oh, Kevin, this is Arash. He works with us, blah, blah, blah. And I looked at McHale and I said, Kevin, the 7-year-old in me just wants to punch you in the face right now. And he laughed. He's like, why is that? And I said, man, I grew up loving the Lakers. He's like, we beat the Lakers all the time. I'm like, not the way I remember it, Kevin. Not the way I remember it. So it was great. We had a laugh, whatever. Matt and McHale kept talking. And I came back and Alvin's dying laughing. And so those were the two kind of moments from the same night. One professionally, one like professionally, personally. And honestly, I got to tell you, Kyle, that moment probably saved me about $20,000 in psychologist fees down the road, because I almost felt like liberated and escaped. That part of the trauma of my childhood got addressed that way by telling Kevin McHale to go fuck himself.
It honestly seems just like that night when the Raptors won, that's kind of like the best day, and everyone from Toronto's like who watched basketball at the time just transcended. Everyone just transcended that day when the Raptors won. Hopefully.
Can I tell you this though, dude? At no point in that series did I ever think they were going to win the series.
Seriously? Even with like all the injuries and everything?
Well, not before the series started. And then it's, Toronto wins game 1. I'm like, okay, that's cute. They got one. And then Golden State tied it, right? 1-1 going back to Oakland. Dubs have home court. I'm like, yeah, we've seen this before. Then Clay does his hamstring first. And it's 3-1 coming home. And everyone's like, okay, this is a wrap Monday night at home. Like it was a coronation. I'm like, well, wait a minute. KD's coming back tonight. And he dominated that first quarter. And then the Achilles comes apart. Even still, at the end, Clay 3, Steph 3, Clay 3, going back to Oakland for game 6. I thought Golden State was going to win game 6 at home. And then if that happens, game 7 up for grabs, who are you betting on? The team with the experience and the championship pedigree and blah, 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 or or those Raptors. And then, I mean, Kawhi Leonard capped off the greatest postseason performance anyone's ever had.
Mhm.
And I'm not a Raptor fan. I hope the franchise does well because that means it's good for basketball in this country.
Yeah.
But genuinely, I just, before the series, during the series, I thought Golden State was going to win. And if you remember that game, Game 6, the Raptors made a terrible turnover at the end of the game.
Yeah. Was it the Danny Green turnover?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh man, here we go again.
Like,
except this time it was different.
It was, and we, even though we might run out of time on the Zoom, I'll send you another link on email just in case, because it might just close. But you might have been in the building when Kevin Durant got injured.
100% I was.
Were the Raptors fans really? Because everyone uses this against Raptors fans. Were they really cheering that injury, or was it just?
Yes.
Were they were cheering the injury?
Yes, and Jeremy Lin was the voice of reason to calm people down. Understand this too. There were barely any Raptor fans in that building. Nobody could afford finals tickets. Nobody could get finals tickets. It's a bunch. The majority of the people in that building are either corporate or Yahoo wannabes, who had some cash on them. So, and yeah, there were some fans in there too.
Yeah, I've always wondered that because I thought a lot of Raptors fans like to argue, oh, they got it was the turnover right before the injury and they were cheering the turnover,
No.
Okay. No. I always wondered that because I
was in the building. Okay. And most of the people who are arguing against it weren't in the building. And if they were in the building, they're sheepish and embarrassed about the way they were acting, about how they handled themselves.
I also think too, because a lot of people at the time, I always thought this was the case too, because a lot of people at the time were new or hopping on the Raptors bandwagon in Toronto because, again, the championship run, and they didn't know basketball etiquette, I should say. Someone gets injured, don't cheer the injury. Yeah.
How about human etiquette?
I've always wanted that too. So that's interesting to hear that they really did cheer that injury.
Oh, yeah.
All right. And that should be everything today. Arash, I want to, again, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
You got it, bud. We'll see you next week.
All right.